Welcome, folks, to the SitRep for today, the 29th of September. 2022. Here we are. There's a lot of shit going down today. Obviously, if you've been looking in the news at all in the past 24 hours, I'll leave you guys alone for 24 hours and look what happens. Honestly, what happens? A lot of shit going on. Firstly, I just want to say thank you very much for joining, for listening in, whether it be on Instagram. I appreciate each and every one of you. On YouTube, which appears to be working today after the last episode. Perhaps I was put into YouTube prison temporarily for being a naughty individual by speaking my own thoughts. That's right-wing extremism right there. Thinking your own thoughts. Can't have that. Not on. Don't do it. Don't think for yourself, all right? We'll tell you what to think. Or whether you're listening to me on the podcast version of this, which I kind of feel might be the most advantageous way to actually access this, in that you don't have to look at this, what's going on, my face so much. I hope you're all well. I hope you're still prepping. Hey, the world is still turning. There's still stuff on the shelves, so life's not all that bad. Just remember that. We've still got time and space and resources right now. Although the whole point of this is to look at how those might be curtailed in the future and to best plan for things that could go wrong in our lives. So to that end, let's have a look at a few things. Obviously, I'll just jump into the big one and get rid of this elephant in the room. Nord Stream pipelines. There has been what appears to be an attack on them. If you haven't seen this in the news, I don't know what kind of rock you're hiding under, but make space for me because I want to come hide there with you. Huge deal. It changes things quite significantly within this theatre, within this area, within the European space. So what we have here now is the way I was looking at it, I kind of alluded to this, I think, on the last SitRep, that I still saw there was opportunity. There was opportunity there for truces to be made, for people to go, hey, let's pump the brakes on this for a sec. Look, let's redo some deals. Maybe we might have to redraw some maps. But at the end of the day, we can stop people dying. We can get gas and fuel into Europe, so we can ease a bit of pain there. And most importantly, we can get food and fertilizer out to the rest of the world so people aren't starving to death en masse. Well, a big chunk just got taken off the table in this game of chess, 4D chess that's going on. One of the big pieces just got taken off the table with this Nord Stream alleged attack. I'm obviously reading a whole heap of this information. I'm seeing what the governments are putting out as far as information is concerned. I'm seeing some of the videos that are coming out around it. It does appear to me like it would be some form of sabotage that's happened here, and especially seeing no one standing up and saying like, yep, it's actually just a breach because the pipes were old or something. There's nothing like that that's happening. It does appear that it might be some sort of sabotage and or attack. Where it's coming from, who knows? Obviously, no one's claiming any sort of responsibility for it at this point. But there are a number of things. And whenever something like this happens, I always sort of look at it and go, okay, who's going to benefit from this the most? Who actually benefits from this? Would it make sense? Because the West has come out and obviously said Russia has done this. Maybe they have. The other side of this is a lot of people are saying CIA, US, Navy SEALs, blah blah blah. Who knows? All right, I certainly don't know. I mean, somebody knows, I'm sure, out there. But there are pros and cons for all sides to do this. The way I look at it, I can see somebody who might be more of a clear winner with this situation now than the other involved parties that are there. Peter Rouse is saying USA terror attack on Russia. Didn't the West just open a pipeline the day before the terrorist attack, yes, that was a pipeline that actually goes from Norway down through into Poland. So yeah, that got opened the day before. But the reports that I've seen in the stuff that's coming out of Norway, the Scandinavian stuff, as in gas, is about equivalent to about 5% of the entire gas needs of Europe. So, like, would it make that much of a difference? Obviously, there's going to be a hike in gas price. Well, you can pretty much guarantee that the gas price is probably going to go through the roof now that a huge chunk of it has been turned off to a huge chunk of the world. That's going to skyrocket demand and throw out gas prices all over the world. So, you know, that is interesting, and that's certainly something we should look at and go like, oh, that's part of it. But it's definitely, from what I have read, it is nowhere near enough to replace what would have been the Nord Stream gas service at capacity. Factor in too that the Nord Stream wasn't actually turned on at the time. It wasn't pumping gas. It was allegedly filled with gas, but the gas was not flowing through. And again, mixed reports on this. Germany has come out and said it may never pump gas again. Certainly one of them. So you had, from what I've read at least, 4 different pipelines here, and 3 are definitely incapacitated. And they're saying that one of them, the Nord Stream 1, will never be capacitated again. It will never work again. It is effectively destroyed, is what they're saying. So the option to even sort of get it up and running again and getting that gas in is not there, and certainly not there before winter hits. And winter is coming to Europe. They're painfully aware of that right now. These pipes designed to take a strike from an anchor. Have you seen the size of the anchors on battleships or tankers? In fact, not on a battleship, but Australian ships. I have been deployed on Australian ships, so I have seen the anchors on them. They are quite large. So obviously, you know, yeah, these things aren't designed. They're not frail. They're not like made of tin foil or something. These things are designed to last a long time under adverse conditions, being in salt water, submerged in salt water for a long period of time, and have the ability to take hits from certain things out there. So what's actually happened there? That, you know, there's a number of options that I've read about this or seen on other channels that could have happened here. Some people have been talking about explosions and stuff like that, but you know, and that is a possibility. But in reality, it could have been done in a number of other ways that don't require submarines going down there, or, you know, some sort of like deep sea diving capability and explosive capability either. That it could have been done maybe even internally, so self-sabotage from the what do you call it, the open end, I guess, the feeding end, i.e. Russia. But, you know, again, it doesn't make a whole heap of sense to me that Russia would do this necessarily. You know, it takes this entire bargaining chip, as far as I can see, and you know, this is just me sitting back here having a look thing. Is definitely not any sort of professional opinion, but I would look at it from that distance sort of thing, that distance, and go, it just doesn't make sense on the surface level, at least, that Russia would curtail one of their bargaining chips, potential bargaining chips here. Hey, come December, Germany, I see you're hurting. I tell you what, ease some of these sanctions, we'll turn the gas back on. And now that's not an option, apparently. A lot of other countries, Denmark, Norway specifically, and even Sweden has chimed in on this and said that they have come out, and Denmark definitely leading the way, saying this is sabotage. This is 100% sabotage. Chuck in, like, there's a whole heap of other stuff in here. Chuck into the mix too Biden's comments, or the US government comments, which I have somewhere down here. Quote from President Biden, US President Biden: "If Russia invades," there was a whole heap of other things in here, but this part, "then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it." And then a reporter asked, "But how will you do that exactly, since the project is in Germany's control?" Biden: "I promise you we will be able to do that." Also, Victoria Newland: If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward. So this has been plastered in a few different options. This was actually sent to me, the first time I saw this was sent to me through one of the sources on Instagram, who's in the European theatre at the moment. I mean, the Victoria Newland thing, that doesn't actually shock me or anything like that, because it's essentially word for word what Biden said. And that's what we always see within the US government at the moment, is this parroting of information. So Biden, even in some of his gaffes, he'll come out and say something and then they'll parrot that back and they'll go, no, he meant that, blah, 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 and just say it almost word for word, which is what we're seeing here. So it's not confirmation in any way, shape or form that this is what the intention was. And Biden, I mean, I think this is a classic example of painting the target around the arrow. Biden said a lot of shit, like a lot of shit falls out of that dude's mouth. And, and now something has happened and you're like, he said that. He said exactly this was going to happen. He also said a whole, myriad of different crap. So I don't know. And to foreshadow that level of an attack on something that is essentially German property, or not property, but has strong German ties. Yeah, I don't know about that. It's at this point, I'm going to err on the side of caution and just sort of sit back and go, well, let's see where this plays out. But at the end of the day, this is a bad situation for Europe and Germany in particular, and it once again highlights the fragility of our energy systems. And it's something that that's the purpose of these SitReps, is for us to look at these sort of events and go like, what if this happened in Australia or New Zealand or something like that? What if we were cut off from gas or any resource, electricity or something like that? How can I supply myself so I'm not freaking out like German people are allegedly en masse at the moment, trying to secure wood and trying to secure wood burning heaters and cooking apparatus, just so they can heat their homes and eat. So this is the sort of stuff where I look at this and go, right, what can I do in my life to make this better? It's not enough for us to just get consumed by the media cycle and go down the little fear circle that they want you to sort of disappear down, so they have you in their grips and they can keep pumping the fear into you, so you keep clicking on the bait. What we actually need to do is go, okay, I can see how that's a fearful situation and how things have escalated in this area from a strategic standpoint right now. But also, what do I do in my life? What are you doing in your life right now to make your life more resilient against these sorts of things? Again, I'll keep saying it. We should not rely on our government wholesale for our lives, for the things that sustain us. It has proven time and time again that when the chips are down, these systems will fail, or the government will fail. What do we got here? Peter Rouse says, Victoria Newland also talked about taking out the pipelines. Remember, Victoria Newland was behind Ukraine and her phone conversation where she said, F the EU. I mean, certainly from the perspective of this, I would say, hey, if I'm looking at my economy and I happen to be the big dog for the past 50 years, and all money is transacted in the US petrodollar sphere, and I see that crumbling away, and then things happen, and I see that money, even though it is becoming horribly inflated and I have overprinted it, situations are much worse in the world that makes them worse. So that makes mine look better, even though in reality, the US dollar has not gotten any better. It's got, in fact, worse, but it has got worse at less velocity than, say, the pound sterling or the euro or even the Australian dollar. Now, that can only last so long, where these things start to stabilize and we all of a sudden see how much the US dollar is sliding in its power, and people freak out. And freaking out when you're talking about things like currency and stocks and stuff like that is like, I want to say cancer, but it's much worse. It's like fire, and it self-burns. It goes, oh, there's fire, there's more heat. Oh my God, quick, boom. And it actually takes off like that. So I think US is really trying to forestall that. Like I said, look who benefits from this. A crippled Eurozone is technically beneficial, not in the long term, but in the very, very short term to the US dollar. So I was looking at the stock markets and a whole heap of the indices and even things like gold and silver prices, to a certain extent, cryptocurrency prices over the past 3 or 4 days, and it has been red. If you guys haven't been paying attention to it, like a lot of people, myself included, were thinking, is this, are we like sliding on the cliff now and we just don't know it yet? Because it's looking bad. Well, today it's all green. Everything shot back up. And I thought, that's interesting. This huge attack happened. We know that an entire continent is going to be in the hurt locker very soon now because of it. And all the markets are shooting up. I mean, the US market, and obviously the Aussie markets followed on suit this morning, just going off what the US market does. But, you know, again, this is not nuanced at all. This is a very, very like broad picture that I'm painting here. But it's just interesting and worthwhile to start thinking about this sort of stuff and looking at it going, okay, what's going on there? Who's making these maneuvers? I guess what I'm ultimately trying to do here is say to you, it's, you know, don't just jump on whatever bandwagon, because there's many of them at the moment. Say it was them, it was definitely them, it was definitely them. Understand that this is a complicated situation, but like I said before, what you actually need to take out of this is, what can I do to build a better, resilient life? That's where we should be concentrating, I think. Just on this, I'll keep on the same area for now. Germany comes out and says our imagination no longer yields a scenario that is not a targeted attack. So a lot of countries obviously coming out and saying it's a targeted attack. Denmark can't rule out that it's not a deliberate attack. CIA warned German government of potential attacks on Baltic Sea pipelines. No date on that one. And all right, let's put this into the context of what else has been going on, because the other big part of what's been happening in the European area at the moment is obviously the voting for those breakaway areas of the Ukraine that Russia is claiming that they've got independence and they're now voting to become part of Russia. Obviously, everyone else except China, I think, surprise, surprise, is coming out and saying that this is totally illegitimate. No, this doesn't matter what they say. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. But we need to see where this is pointing, because this is trending towards an area that looks something like this. These, by all accounts, it looks like the vast amount of voting is done, and it looks like by landslide in the 90s. Surprise, surprise, they've voted to become part of Russia. So Russia, there's still a number of steps to come from this. It's not like they just decide on it and then, you know, their flags go down and the Russian flags go up. I would imagine there'd be somewhere in the order of 4 or 5 days to 4 or 5 weeks of toing and froing until Russia actually comes out and says, yep, that's us now, right? This is the new border. Why is this important? Because then any acts that happen on there are happening on, as far as Russia is concerned, Russian soil. So that escalates any activities that are happening in those areas. It also, we look what else has been happening in Russia, the mobilization or the partial mobilization that's been happening of their military over the past week, which is most likely foreshadowing full mobilization. And they, instead of having to find some convenient excuse of like, oh, we're just conducting exercises around the border, they don't have to do that anymore. They're like, this is our land, and our military is mobilized, and we feel there is a direct threat to it, so we're pushing our military fully into those areas, reinforcing their hold on those certain areas there. So all very interesting stuff, and it's all pointing towards somewhere that's not a good place, obviously. On top of this, the US Embassy has just warned Americans to leave Russia immediately. So That started off as when I first saw this story pop out, it said the US Embassy has told its US Embassy staff and people who are not critical to head out of Russia now. It's time to go. Well, that apparently has been ramped up, and they're telling all American citizens, anyone who happens to be in Russia, they need to get out immediately. The last time we saw the US putting out information like this, it was around about, I want to say February 20th, 21st of this year in the Ukraine. So obviously the 24th of February is when Russia went in. So they started putting out warnings like this. The time before that was Kabul, Afghanistan, and we saw what a shit fight that whole debacle was. So yeah, when the US starts doing this sort of stuff, when information like this comes out, it's the kind of thing that pricks up my ears a little bit. I'm like, okay, all right, what's about to kick off here? Peter Rouse, under the UN and international law that can vote to leave Ukraine. Remember, Russia has 30 million active / reserve military. They certainly have a very large military. There's no doubt about that. Not sure US citizens want to go back to US, safer in Russia right now with crime in the US. Yeah, well, you know, who knows? I don't think any of those two areas are a great place to be in. I certainly wouldn't want to be in them, seeing that I probably still fall within the broader sense of a fighting age male right now in Russia. Probably not somewhere I'd want to be. And the US is a big place. They do have a lot of crime statistics coming out that are very shocking, but there's a lot of areas that are not so bad in the US either. But, you know, personal preference, I don't mind. It's up to the individual where you want to live in the world. If you want to live in the US right now, go for it. If you want to live in Russia right now, also go for it. I will say this, though, Peter. Here is some really interesting information. This stuff I found really interesting. Inflation rates and cost of living rates. That's something that I would really look into. The difference between what the cost of living is currently in Russia versus the cost of living in the US. Now, obviously, the information that we get on this, the best source of information is getting it off individuals who we trust. So it is difficult to do that. We can see the information in the US. We can see what prices are in the US. Sometimes it can be more difficult within Russia, especially if we look at the official sources. But there have been a couple of sources now that I've seen that have been from individuals who are actually in Russia and don't have any ties to the government and don't have any need to put out information that would be anything but the truth, who have said that cost of living within Russia is significantly lower at the moment than pretty much anywhere in Europe and the US and Australia and New Zealand. So yeah, cost of living in Russia is very, very low. Last time I was there, it was so cheap. And apparently it hasn't gone up. There's been a couple of things that have gone up a little bit, but apparently it has not gone up that much, and certainly not as much as we have felt here in the quote-unquote Western world. All right, what other stories have I got? Let's jump into some other information now. Jump into Vietnam. They're bracing for Typhoon Noru, about to smash into Vietnam, so possibly affecting a number of other countries around Vietnam as well. But Vietnam, obviously, in the direct path of it. Other weather information, where'd it go? Cuba has been left totally without power, the entire country without power. Pretty shocking. This is because of Hurricane Ian. Is it Ian? Yeah, that's about to barrel into Florida at the moment, or is barreling into Florida at the moment, I should say. Huge storm that's smashing into there. A lot of issues right now, and probably a lot more in the next 24 hours with this. if you do happen to be anywhere around these areas, I'm not sure why you're sitting here listening to me. You should be battening down the hatches and obviously reinforcing your safe space to ride this thing out if you haven't already evacuated from these areas. But yeah, this one popped into my feed and I saw that and I was like, that's very interesting. A country without power. Now, obviously, Cuba probably doesn't have the power grid infrastructure that a lot of other countries do. But I will say this. We think our power infrastructure within the West, especially places like Australia and parts of the US as well, we think it's really, really good, and it's actually not. It is actually quite an aged infrastructure that we have, and it is like relatively vulnerable. But this always, piques my interest again. This is another energy sector thing where I think about, hey, what if this happened to us? Localized blackouts, we've all been through them. They're fine. Power usually comes back on. But very rarely have people experienced having a blackout beyond their local area, and it can be horrific. It can be quite bad because it's not just as simple as like rerouting power around another place or just putting one pole back up that someone crashed into and making sure that the lines are intact. We got entire grid go down. That's a huge thing. So again, these are things that I would implore you to really consider in your life. Hey, how do I get electricity? How do I get electricity in an emergency? How do I do things like maybe keep some lights turned on, but keep things like fridges and freezers kicking over, and maybe be able to power things like communication devices? This is all the sort of stuff that I would really suggest you want to think about in your life. Puerto Rico is still underwater and without power, yet Biden still sending billions to Ukraine. Yep. Spice Gal 27 says, how much is HARP involved in world weather manipulation? I have zero idea. I don't know, if we looked at it from a percentage, how much it would be. I think there's probably other factors in that. Climate change is probably affecting the amount of weather events that we have, and also the spread of human beings, in geographically speaking, of where we live. And just to put a little stop note in there before everyone blows up their tinfoil hats and go, climate change is all a fucking lie. Climate change is not a lie. The climate does change. Okay, you need to just get your head around that. I'm not saying that humans necessarily caused it or exacerbated or did anything. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But if we look back at things like geographical studies, and we can see what weather effects were over a longer time period than the 4 years that we usually think about, then we can see that the weather has gone up and down, and there's been extended periods of like mini ice ages, and there's been extended periods of extreme heat and storm-like activity. And we're probably in one of those periods right now. So I think that probably has a lot to do with it. Might be convenient, I think, for there to be, some sort of dark shadowy figure in the background who's just causing it all, because then we could just turn it off, right? But I think it's actually more complicated than that and more difficult for us to stop, if at all. Peter Rouse says, actually less hurricanes, etc. than 60 years ago. CNN host just got smashed by scientist on air. Yeah. Yep. This is the sort of stuff like, when we start looking back on a longer time period for weather effects on Earth, we can start to see that, there's been a lot of variance. And what we've been living through recently has actually been a like oddly mild period where things have been okay. And we kind of just adjust to that because we're humans. It's what we do. It's normalcy bias. We adjust we adapt to our environment. And so if our environment is easy and comfortable, we adapt to that. Maybe now we're coming into a period where we might have to adapt to harder conditions. That's certainly what I believe, at least. Seems our Aussie government is cloud seeding the heck out of Queensland right now. Not sure. I'm not really tracking that. So could be. Climate change is real, but the hands that get involved in it are making it worse for their own benefit. That's from Janufi. Good morning to you. Peter Rouse says, never forget ClimateGate 2009, where they were caught in emails. So I think, like, for me at least, the jury is out as far as something like cloud seeding goes. I think it's pretty obvious. You're going to be pretty hard up, I reckon, to deny that cloud seeding is actually a thing. It is a well-documented fact of a, I guess you would call it technically a farming technique, but really it is us trying to manipulate weather in that sense. It's kind of like when we say it is actually a relatively low-tech version of trying to affect weather. And it's been around for donkey's years. It's been around for decades and decades and decades. It's kind of like when we go genetically modified, right? That instantly conjures up this idea of some lab science nerd going like in a test tube and growing some sheep fetus or something weird. It goes genetically modified corn, mutant corn. I mean, technically, when we splice two different breeds together of whatever, then we have modified the genetics of it. So that's genetic modification. That's just a really low-tech way of doing it. And we have done that as human beings for a very, very long time. We haven't always done it like what we do now, where it's gone to the nth degree and it's gone, in my opinion, crazy. And there are a number of unintended effects, side effects from those sorts of things. But yeah, anyway, just in a snapshot there, I don't know, I was going on some sort of weird tangent talking about cloud seeding and weather effects. Definitely something to think about. I just will say this too, like my take on when it comes to stuff like this, I always go like, yes, it could be this big, bad, nefarious organization working in the shadows, doing all this sort of stuff. What can I do about it? That's the question I always ask. What can I do about it? Because I just see this tendency within people to gravitate towards the conspiracy theories. And I'm not telling you to not gravitate towards conspiracy theories, because the thing about conspiracy theories is if you throw enough shit at the wall, something's going to stick, right? Some of them are correct. Some of them end up being correct. Now, the thing is, though, is how does it affect your behavior? Are you just looking at these things and going, the government's doing this and they've got microchips in my brain and they're controlling the fucking monkeys and, you know, splicing gene technology into our food and blah, blah, blah. How does it affect your behavior? If you're just sitting there spinning your wheels on the fear cycle and having a good old fear wank about it, then you're doing the wrong thing. I'm sorry. I think you're doing the wrong thing. You need to look at that information and go, okay, well, if they're doing that, how do I get the fuck away from them? How do I do my own thing? That's the kind of stuff that I want to encourage, is go like, okay, yep, cool. You know, I love a good conspiracy theory as much as the next person, but how does it actually change my life? How does it make my change my behavior, and how does it make my life better? That's what I think we need to think about when it comes to these things. After ClimateGate, they had to change from climate warming to climate change. GM is genetically modified is far different. Putting salmon genes in tomatoes is not the same. Yeah, that's correct. That's what I'm saying, is like, technically speaking, we can modify the genes of something, and we can do it in relatively natural ways. Well, you know, ways that don't require labs or anything like that. And that's what I'm saying, is that where we're getting to at this point in time, when we're thinking about how we affect the climate, how we change things around us, how we manipulate our food growing system, and we manipulate the weather, and we change, you know, genetically modify things, is that we're going to the next step now, or we've gone way, way beyond the next step. And I would argue too far. Too far is where we're going. But again, how does this change my behavior? Where I look at this and I go, okay, well, I will endeavor to take things that are GM out of my life as much as possible. In fact, if I can't do that with something, I will endeavor to take that into my own hands. I.e., if I'm not happy with how Australia grows wheat, and we generally grow the same sort of wheat because it works here, and I go, I don't like that wheat, and I have a feeling, or I have read some stuff that makes me think that perhaps it's not good for human beings, or some human beings. then if I want wheat, then I should go and find the wheat that I want, and I should grow that myself. That's what I'm talking about. This is a change in behavior. That's what we need to start really thinking about. And all the stuff that I was talking about today, even the Nord Stream sort of stuff, this information that's going out there, we can either sit there in that little fear mud pit, wallowing in it, or we can use it like a fire lit under us to start moving, get this thing happening, and start working on our prep, start working on our own lives to make sure that we're much more self-reliant human beings, that we're starting to work on ourselves mentally, work on ourselves physically, create physical preps and preparations around us so we're more ready to take on whatever life's going to throw at us, and start making the connections within our communities as well, to start building up these resources within our communities. One thing why I often say, like, if you're in a city, maybe you should start thinking about possibly, moving out of the city. I imagine most cities, it would be very difficult to grow enough food within the city limits, even within the surrounding areas. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would require a lot of work, and it would require everyone being on board, basically. And I just don't think that cities have that tipping point yet where enough people are on board for this sort of stuff. Although, my heart actually says don't tell people to move out of the cities, because they move out of the cities to places like where I live and drive up the housing prices, which make it hard for me to live. Anyway. Other interesting news. So just some little side funny things that I found just to wrap up today. Royal Air Force admits mistakes were made after claims it prioritized hiring ethnic minority and female candidates, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. However, especially when it comes to things like the military, I would prefer that you hire whoever it is who is best for the job, because it's fighting war. It's protecting the nations, protecting the people, right? So I don't really care who does that. If that happens to be someone from an ethnic minority, if it happens to be someone with, I don't know, red hair and blue eyes, which is statistically speaking the most unlikely combination of human being that you're going to get. If it happens to be someone with, whatever melatonin level in their skin, whatever, I don't care. Like, this is an organization that should work on function. What can you function? What can you do as a human being? Right. That's who we pick. So there was some claims that came out about the Royal Air Force, which is the UK Air Force, the RAF, that one of the head of recruitment, and I did talk about this at the time that it happened, the head of recruitment said, no, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to prioritize anyone, especially, like, I'm not prioritizing people over, say, white men, which is the majority of the military force within the UK, because they actually believed it was unlawful to do so. Got a lot of trouble in it. There's a whole fallout from it. But anyway, the Royal Air Force has actually come out now and said, mea culpa. Yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that. Sorry about that. I just thought that was super interesting, like funny to me. I'm just like, yeah, well, this is the sort of space, like there is space, I think, within society for us to go, hey, let's increase our diversity in here. But when it comes to military, this kind of boggles my mind a little bit. Yeah, we need diversity within military. I agree. Like, I couldn't agree more. However, what trumps that is actual function. We need people who function. We need people who can do the job. That here's the standards, okay? And this is hard standards. These are like physics sort of standards. These are those kind of levels of law. A person needs to be able to do X, Y, and Z in order to be an effective soldier on the battlefield. Like, bullets don't care. That's all I can say. And I've said this in my courses and stuff before, that the bullets don't care. They don't care about the color of your skin. They don't care what gender you have chosen, or what gender you are. They don't care about any of that. A bullet will tear through my body as much as it will somebody who identifies as a, I don't know, brick wall. It's still going to have the same effect on those two bodies. So, at the end of the day, war is built around hard realities, actual realities. And so I think it's good, maybe, that they're at least admitting that, hey, maybe that wasn't the best idea. The other one that I want to talk about lastly to finish up today is this. Now, I did touch on this when it happened, where I was a bit like, what's going on, world? What's happening here? iPhone 14 came out, and I looked at it. I got excited. I'm actually quite techie myself. I like, new shiny things, and I like technology that makes our lives better, easier, faster, and more capable to do things. And I looked at it and I said, okay, there's a significant upgrade in the camera. A lot of the other stuff in the iPhone 14, I was just like, a couple of things are okay. There was a really cool function where you could get satellite communications on your iPhone. That was mind-blowing. That was the thing that got me in. I was like, yes, this is it. And then I found out it was only in the US and Canada. So I was like, doesn't really help me. But anyway, I looked at it on the whole and said, is this a massive upgrade from the previous model? Not really. But apparently there was a huge waiting list for people to get one. And I thought, well, this is just it. Looking at everything that's happening in the world at the moment, here's where people are prioritizing putting their money. They're not buying backup generators. They're not buying extra drop freezers for their storage of meat, their long-term storage. They're not buying land or anything like that. They're buying iPhones. Like, this is the priority that average human beings have in the world at the moment. But is it? Futures tumble after report Apple backs off plans to increase iPhone production due to lack of demand. So I'm looking at a graph right now that's going up and down like this and then down. Pretty damning evidence that apparently there was a massive lack in demand, or I'll put it this way, they expected this much growth and they got this much growth. And that obviously has some pretty big downstream effects for Apple and the. Sorry, just a phone call trying to come through there. I'll just wait for a sec while Instagram sorts its shit out and maybe reconnects. We back? All right. I think Instagram's back on now. So yeah, interesting stuff. I thought that, and maybe my lack of faith in humanity is partially restored. If the lack of faith there was a drop off of 37%, maybe it's come back about 2.7%. So good on yous. But who knows? I still might go out and buy one. Not likely. We're talking about Mylar bags here. Janufi says, working on Mylar bags as we speak. SpyScale27 says, what's a Mylar bag? To which Janufi says, long-term storage bags for food prep. Hun X. Yep, Mylar bags, great idea to buy. I'm just waiting for some money to come in. I'm about to do a buy up from one of my favorite online stores, which I have no affiliation with. I just like their vibe and what they do for Aussies. survivalsuppliesaustralia.com.au. I'm buying some more Mylar bags. I've got some huge ones off them. I'm about to get some medium sort of size, medium and small ones to package up some stuff. Mylar bags, it's like a silvery material. You put food in there, food grade material. You can vacuum seal it. You can seal them up, throw an oxygen absorber in there, and that will keep your food safe. Light can't penetrate it. Air can't get in there. So you can store food for a long time. And I do that if I go and buy like a 20 kilo bag of rice. I'll break it up into maybe 250 gram Mylar bags and store them. And that way, when we need it, we open up 250 grams, cook that amount of rice or however much you want, 100 grams. And you're not opening an entire bag and having 19.7 kilo of rice just sitting out there, being exposed to moisture, being exposed to sun, being exposed to potentially pests and things like that. So Mylar bags, really handy thing for long-term food storage. Couldn't recommend them enough. All right, I'm going to cut it there today, gang. Thank you very much, as always, for joining me. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the questions that have been coming in, all the comments that come in, good, bad, or otherwise. Usually Instagram good, YouTube some good, some not so good, but it's all right. I appreciate them all. It shows me that you're at least watching and you're listening, and that you are thoughtful human beings, which is what we all trying to encourage here. We're just trying to encourage each other to be better prepared and to be more thoughtful when we're walking around the world, seeing what's happening at the moment, and having that forethought and planning as stuff is happening. But yeah, as always, stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open to what's going on. Keep prepping. If you can, get in the garden. It's a miserable day here. I shouldn't say miserable. It's just a rainy, cold day here. That's not miserable necessarily. It just is. It's good weather for ducks today. And until next time, gang, Semper Paratus.